you home.
Namaste. Let's consider space. What does the Buddha have to say about it? Let's take a look. Rāhula, what is the space element? The space element may be internal or external. Whether space element is internal or external, it is the same space element. It should be accurately seen with right wisdom in this way. This is not mine. I am not this. This is not myself. When one has accurately seen it with right wisdom in this way, one becomes disenchanted with the space element, and the mind becomes dispassionate towards the space element. Rāhula, practice peacefulness of space meditation. Rāhula, when you practice peacefulness of space meditation, then sensations that arise, whether pleasing or displeasing, will not dominate your mind. Rāhula, just as space is not stuck anywhere, in the same way, Rāhula, practice peacefulness of space meditation. Rāhula, when you practice peacefulness of space meditation, then sensations that arise, whether pleasing or displeasing, will not dominate your mind. So here the Buddha is addressing his son, who has become a monk. And he's giving him instruction on meditation. So he's saying that one should meditate on space, not to identify with it, because then that would be another trap, but to release one's identification with space and become like space. Let's consider, what is space? Space is the extension of dimension or dimensions. In other words, it's an extent, an expanse, room, lots and lots of room. And space is everywhere the same. It's not like the space over here is different from the space over there. Space cannot be divided. Even though we may say, for example, the space inside the cup versus the space outside the cup. Actually, the space is one. And we just make a distinction based on our perceptions and our definitions. What is inside and what is outside. What is internal and what is external. Space is everywhere the same. And space doesn't cling to anything. It has no resistance. You know, of the elements or states of matter, space is the most subtle. Earth has tremendous resistance, solidity. Liquid or water has quite a bit of resistance, not as much as earth. But still, if you've ever done a high dive into some water, you know it definitely has resistance. Even air, fire, and plasma, gas, ionized gas, has resistance. Even light has resistance. Enough resistance that a solar sail can power a spacecraft. But space has no resistance, none whatsoever. Space does not resist an object passing through it or being in it at all. It's like it's not even there. Yet, without space, nothing can exist. And also, space is not dependently arisen. It doesn't rest on anything. It doesn't depend on anything. It's completely independent. You can't grasp it. You can't put it in a bottle. Well, it's already in the bottle. But space is just completely free from any kind of manipulation or interaction with anything else. Really quite remarkable. Space in Sanskrit is called akash, which is sometimes mistranslated as ether. But ether is an obsolete term. And what it means is a medium for radiation, for other energies as well. But we know now that energy doesn't need a medium. All it needs is a space, and it propagates by itself. So space is a very interesting thing because it doesn't cling, it doesn't resist, it doesn't have any dependencies. And so it's extremely anti-fragile, extremely robust. It can't be cut or bounded or separated. It is one whole thing, infinite, unbounded, and free from all resistance. So, what does that mean for us? It means that we should be like space. We should be free from resistance, free from structures, because all structures are boundaries. All structures have an inside and an outside, where it is not, a location. One may have a location in space, but space itself has no location because it doesn't rest on anything. In other words, space is very much like Brahman, the self with a capital S, the reality, the basis of everything. Even consciousness requires an object. So there has to be a boundary between the seer and the seen. There has to be a distinction. Not so with space, or Brahman, or the self. There is no distinction between seer and seen. In fact, a very good definition of Brahman is that Brahman is a space of awareness, not consciousness, because consciousness requires an object, a division. But one whole thing, without division, boundaryless, infinite, and made of pure awareness. So Brahman and space have a lot in common. They both don't rest on anything, don't depend on anything, don't interact with anything, can't be divided or cut or forced to do anything. In fact, they don't do anything. They're completely passive. And yet, everything depends on them. Whatever exists has to exist in space. Otherwise, it can't be. And similarly, whatever we are aware of in consciousness depends on Brahman, awareness, which is ultimately pure being. Sat, Chit, Ananda. Eternal being, consciousness, and bliss. So one might say, well, in Brahman you have awareness, and you also have being, because it has to exist. But what about bliss? If there's nothing to perceive in Brahman, How can we enjoy anything? How can it be pleasant? How can it be nice? And the answer is given by Sariputta. Sariputta was one of Buddha's principal disciples. And one time the monks asked him, he was talking about Nibbana. He's saying, oh, this unbinding is so pleasant. It's so nice. And the monks were saying, how can it be blissful if nothing is felt, if nothing is perceived? And Sariputta answered, the fact that nothing is perceived is what makes it blissful. See, as soon as we have an object that's perceived, we have a boundary between the seer and the seen. And boundaries are essentially obstacles. They're painful. They divide. So every perception, according to the Buddha, is actually painful because it rests on a division of the self into seer and seen, subject and object, consciousness and the inert objects that's seen. This is inherently painful. Awareness wants to be one, unlimited, boundaryless, unconditioned, uncaused, not resting on anything, not dependent on anything. Pure, objectless, unconditioned awareness. This is Nibbana. It has no dimensions. It has no change, no movement. It's there everywhere and in everything, if we but become aware of it. So this awareness, this self or Brahman, is like space. It doesn't stick to anything. It doesn't become conditioned by anything. It's not dependent on anything. So it can never be destroyed or changed or harmed. It can never feel pain. And that itself is the highest bliss. So when the Buddha says, practice this space meditation, what he's saying is, let your mind, let your consciousness, let yourself become like space. And don't cling to anything. Don't cling to any structures. Don't try to create any systems. Don't try to resist anything. Simply allow everything to be that is within unlimited space, unlimited awareness. And this in itself is the end of all suffering, or the highest enlightenment. Aum Tat Sat. Aum Shakti Aum.